belief. "But Master, it might break completely. It's damaged. It's not the right tool anymore." "It's the tool you have," the abbot replied. "Use it until it no longer works. Then we'll discuss what comes next." The monk returned to his work, angry and resentful. He felt the abbot was being unreasonable, forcing him to work with inferior equipment when anyone could see the pestle was broken. But he had his assignment, so he began grinding. At first, he ground carefully, tentatively, afraid the pestle would shatter in his hands. He kept stopping to check if the crack had widened. Every grain he ground felt like a reminder that he was working with something imperfect, something damaged, something that shouldn't be trusted. Days passed. The crack didn't grow. The pestle kept working. Slowly, reluctantly, the monk began to adjust. He found that if he changed his grip slightly, the pressure didn't fall directly on the cracked section. If he ground in smaller batches, he didn't need to press as hard. If he worked more slowly and mindfully, he could feel when the pestle was under stress and ease back. Within 2 weeks, he was grinding as much flour as he ever had, maybe more. The pestle with the crack was teaching him to pay attention in ways the perfect pestle never had. One morning, the abbot came to watch him work. The monk was deep in the rhythm of grinding, his movements smooth and practiced, his attention fully present with each stroke. "Tell me," the abbot said, "are you still waiting for a new pestle?" The monk paused, surprised to realize he'd forgotten about it entirely. "No, Master," he said slowly. "This one works." "Does it work as well as the old one?" The monk considered this carefully. "It works differently. I have to pay more attention. I have to adjust my technique. But yes, it works. Sometimes I think it works better because I'm more present with it." The abbot smiled. This is the teaching. Life cracks things. Tools break. Bodies age. Plans fail. Circumstances change. You can spend your energy wishing for what's not cracked, or you can learn to work skillfully with what is. The monk bowed, understanding finally what the abbot had been trying to show him from the beginning. This story cuts to the heart of a crucial distinction in Buddhist practice. Acceptance is not the same as resignation. Resignation says, "The pestle is cracked, so I give up. I'll just do poor work because I have poor tools. Nothing I can do about it." Acceptance says, "The pestle is cracked. That's reality. Now, how do I work skillfully within this reality?" One abandons agency. The other finds agency within constraints. Most of us spend enormous energy fighting against what already is. We have the cracked pestle, but we're so busy being angry about the crack that we never learn how to grind grain with it. We're so focused on what should be different that we miss what's actually possible right now. Buddhism teaches radical acceptance of what is, combined with wise action within those circumstances. You don't pretend the crack isn't there. You don't tell yourself a story about how the crack doesn't matter. You see it clearly, accept it as reality, and then figure out how to work with it. This requires discernment, the ability to distinguish between what you can change and what you cannot. The monk could not make the crack disappear. He could not will the pestle back to its original perfect state. Fighting that reality would have been useless suffering. But he could change his grip. He could adjust his technique. He could work in smaller batches. He could pay closer attention. All of that was within his power. The difference matters enormously when you're facing difficulty. A woman develops chronic pain after a car accident. The first year, she fights it constantly, spending all her energy trying to force her body back to how it was before. She pushes through pain until she collapses. She's furious with her body for betraying her. She refuses to modify her activities because modification feels like surrender. Then something shifts. She accepts that pain is now part of her reality. Not forever, necessarily, but for now. She stops fighting and starts adapting. She learns which movements aggravate pain and which don't. She finds exercises that help. She discovers she can do most of what matters to her, just differently than before. This isn't giving up. This is finding power within limitation. A teacher has a student who disrupts class constantly. Standard discipline doesn't work. Consequences don't work. The teacher can spend the year fighting this reality, making herself and the student miserable, or she can accept that this student needs a different approach. She learns that he responds better to movement breaks than to sitting still. That he can focus if he's given a fidget tool. That he thrives when given classroom responsibilities. She adapts her teaching without abandoning her standards, and both of them have a better year. An entrepreneur builds a business that depends on in-person interaction. Then circumstances make in-person work impossible for an extended period. She can rage against the circumstances, or she can accept them and innovate. She creates virtual offerings, finds new ways to connect with clients, discovers markets she never knew existed. A man loses his job at 55. The industry he knows is dying. He can spend his energy bitter about how things should be, or he can accept the changed landscape and find where his skills still matter. He takes his expertise into consulting, into teaching, into an adjacent field that values what he knows. A parent has a child who is not neurotypical. The first years are spent trying to force the child into typical development patterns, into fitting the mold, into being normal. Everyone is miserable. Then the parent accepts their actual child, not the child they imagined, and suddenly they can see their child's actual strengths, actual needs, actual gifts. They adapt their parenting, and their child starts thriving. A writer develops arthritis in her hands. Typing becomes painful. She can stop writing and grieve what's lost. Or she can learn voice-to-text software, dictation, new ways of working. Her process changes completely, and she discovers the change brings new creativity. None of these people resigned themselves to suffering. They all accepted reality and found agency within it. So how do you practice this when you're facing your own cracked pestle? First, acknowledge what's actually broken. Don't minimize it. Don't pretend it's fine when it's not. The crack is real. See it clearly. Second, stop fighting the fact that it's cracked. This happened. This is reality now. Fighting reality is suffering added to suffering. Third, ask what's actually still possible. Not what should be possible if things were different, but what's genuinely available right now, given exactly how things are. Fourth, experiment with different approaches. The monk had to try different grips, different techniques, different batch sizes. He had to discover what worked with this particular crack. You'll need to experiment too. Fifth, notice when you're confusing acceptance with resignation. Resignation is passive, hopeless, abdication of agency. Acceptance is clear seeing that leads to wise action. Finally, stay present with what you're learning. The monk discovered that working with the cracked pestle taught him things the perfect pestle never could. Your constraints might be teaching you something valuable too. Tonight, if you're facing something broken that won't go back to how it was, remember this. The monk wanted a perfect pestle. He got a cracked one. He could have refused to work, spent his energy angry, ground poor flour while wishing for better tools. Instead, he learned to work with what he had. Not by pretending it wasn't cracked, but by accepting the crack and finding skill within that reality. The Buddha taught that suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our relationship to pain. Not from difficulty, but from our resistance to difficulty. Not from having cracked tools, but from refusing to learn how to use them. The pestle will crack. Something in your life will break. The body will age. Circumstances will change. Plans will fail. That's not the problem. The problem is thinking you can't work, can't thrive, can't create anything beautiful with cracked tools. The solution is learning to grind grain anyway, with attention, with adaptation, with acceptance of what is. This is wise action within constraints. This is freedom that doesn't require perfect conditions. This is the crack in the pestle that teaches what the perfect pestle never could. After years of studying with his teacher Marpa, the Tibetan yogi Milarepa retreated to a cave high in the Himalayas. Not for a week or a month, but for years of solitary practice in conditions that would break most people within days. The cave was barely shelter. Wind howled through cracks in the rock. Snow piled at the entrance during winter, sometimes blocking him in completely. The stone floor was so cold that sitting on it felt like sitting on ice. Milarepa owned nothing. One thin cotton robe, so worn it was falling apart. No blankets, no fire, no supplies stored away for harsh weather. Just him, the cave, and his practice. He ate nettles. Only nettles. Not because he was following some extreme diet plan, but because nettles were the only thing that grew near his cave. Day after day, month after month, year after year, boiled nettles when he had fuel for fire, raw nettles when he didn't. His body began to change. His skin turned greenish from the nettles. His hair fell out in clumps. He became so thin that every bone showed through his skin. He was cold constantly, hunger a permanent companion, his body breaking down from deprivation. Sometimes, hunters would pass near his cave and see this strange green creature huddled in the entrance, barely human. They thought he was a demon or a ghost. They would throw stones, shout at him to leave, threaten him. Milarepa would just sit there, watching them with calm eyes, saying nothing. His sister came once, horrified by what she found. "Brother, you're dying," she wept. "This practice is killing you. Come home. Eat real food. Live like a human being." Milarepa smiled at her gently. "I am more alive now than I ever was living comfortably. What looks like death to you is actually life to me." She didn't understand. How could suffering bring life? How could deprivation create strength? How could someone wasting away in a freezing cave claim to be thriving? But something was happening in that cave that had nothing to do with physical comfort. When you have nothing, you discover what you actually are. When the body is weakened, the mind can grow incredibly strong. When external supports are stripped away, internal strength must develop, or you die. Milarepa wasn't torturing himself for religious merit. He wasn't trying to prove his spiritual superiority. He was conducting an experiment in the deepest laboratory possible, his own consciousness under extreme conditions. He wanted to know what remained when everything comfortable was removed. He wanted to discover what mind could do when body was reduced to almost nothing. He wanted to understand if peace was possible in the worst circumstances imaginable. And he discovered something that changes how we understand strength entirely. Most of us build strength by adding things. We eat more protein to build muscle. We acquire more knowledge to feel confident. We surround ourselves with comforts to feel secure. We accumulate possessions, relationships, achievements, trying to feel strong by having more. Milarepa discovered strength by removing everything until only essence remained. In the cave, he couldn't distract himself from his mind. No entertainment, no companionship, no variation in routine to break up the monotony. Just him and his thoughts, hour after hour, day after day, facing everything he'd been avoiding his entire life. Fear came up. In the darkness, listening to wolves howl outside, feeling his body weaken from hunger, watching storms that could easily kill him, fear was constant. But with nowhere to run from it, Milarepa learned to sit with fear until it revealed its nature. Fear wasn't a thing. It was a pattern of thoughts and sensations. When he stopped fighting it, it lost its power. Loneliness came up. Months would pass with no human contact. The silence was so complete. It felt like being the only person left alive. But in that loneliness, Milarepa discovered something strange. He was never actually alone. Awareness was always there, experiencing everything. The mind that watched loneliness was itself not lonely. Anger came up. Rage at his teacher for the harsh training that led him here. Fury at circumstances beyond his control. Resentment about the unfairness of suffering. But burning in that anger year after year, he discovered something profound. Anger was fuel. Not fuel for hatred, but fuel for transformation when directed wisely. Despair came up. Days when he thought he'd made a terrible mistake, when continuing seemed pointless, when death would be easier than one more day of cold and hunger. But each time despair threatened to overwhelm him, he found that just beneath it was something unbreakable, some part of awareness that could witness even despair without being destroyed by it. Gradually, through years of this crucible, Milarepa's mind became like steel, forged in fire. Not hard and brittle, but strong and flexible. He developed capacity to remain steady through anything. When hunters threw stones, he felt no anger. When cold bit through his thin robe, he felt no complaint. When hunger gnawed at his belly, he felt no desperation. Not because he'd become numb, but because he'd discovered a layer of consciousness that wasn't touched by these conditions. This is what Buddhist practice actually points toward. Not becoming superhuman, not transcending being human, but discovering the part of you that's already free, right in the middle of suffering. You don't need to live in a cave eating nettles to access this, but you do need to stop running from difficulty. Think about how you handle hardship currently. Something challenging happens, and your first instinct is to escape it, fix it, distract from it, make it go away as fast as possible. You reach for food, screens, substances, shopping, anything to avoid feeling what's uncomfortable. This makes perfect sense. Pain hurts. Discomfort is unpleasant. Why would anyone choose to feel difficult things? But here's what Milarepa discovered. Avoiding difficulty keeps you weak. Every time you run from discomfort, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle it. Every time you distract from pain, you miss the opportunity to develop capacity. The muscle that allows you to sit with difficulty only grows through actually sitting with difficulty. The strength to endure comes only through enduring. The peace that exists even in chaos is found only by remaining present in chaos. This doesn't mean seeking out suffering. Milarepa wasn't a masochist enjoying deprivation. It means not wasting the suffering that life naturally brings. When you're going through something hard, you have a choice. You can numb it, distract from it, complain about it, while learning nothing from it. Or you can turn toward it with awareness and discover what it's teaching. The insomnia that won't let you sleep, instead of fighting it desperately, what happens if you just lie there awake, watching the mind, getting curious about what insomnia actually feels like when you're not resisting it? The grief that keeps returning, instead of trying to get over it faster, what happens if you let yourself feel it completely, learning its texture, its waves, its eventual transformation? The anxiety that tightens your chest, instead of immediately trying to make it go away, what happens if you stay present with the sensations, breathing into them, discovering they can't actually destroy you? The loneliness that aches in your bones, instead of frantically filling the space with noise and activity, what happens if you sit in the loneliness until you discover what exists underneath it? This is Milarepa's cave for modern life. Not literal deprivation, but choosing to stay present with difficulty instead of running. He discovered that mind can bear far more than body can. That consciousness can remain aware even when everything else is falling apart. That peace doesn't require comfortable conditions. It's accessible right in the middle of the storm. After years in the cave, Milarepa emerged with realization so complete that even his teacher was astonished. His body was wrecked, but his mind was diamond. He had nothing but possessed everything. He looked like he was dying but had never been more alive. He spent the rest of his life teaching, and people were drawn to him, not because he was comfortable or successful, but because he radiated a freedom that didn't depend on circumstances. He'd found the indestructible core through destroying everything destructible. Tonight, if you're in your own cave, whatever form it takes, remember this. Difficulty isn't just something to survive. It's the forge where real strength is built. Every moment, you can stay present with discomfort without running is a moment you're growing capacity you didn't have before. Milarepa turned green from nettles. His body deteriorated. He suffered cold and hunger for years. But he emerged with something no comfortable life could have given him: absolute certainty that consciousness can remain free, regardless of conditions. You have access to this same discovery, not through living in a cave, but through stopping the constant escape from what's difficult in your life right now. The Buddha taught that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Milarepa proved this in the most extreme laboratory possible. Physical pain, hunger, cold, isolation, all inevitable in his cave. But suffering, the mental torment about those conditions, gradually dissolved as he learned to meet difficulty without adding resistance to it. This is the teaching. Build strength not by avoiding hardship, but by developing capacity to remain aware within it. Find freedom not by changing circumstances, but by discovering the part of you that's already free. The cave is wherever you are right now, with exactly the difficulties you're facing. And the strength Milarepa found is available to you too, if you stop running long enough to let it develop. Before the Buddha was the Buddha, he was a man named Siddhartha, who was starving himself to death. For 6 years he'd practiced the most extreme asceticism imaginable. He reduced his food intake to a single grain of rice per day, then to nothing at all. His body became skeletal, his ribs protruding like bamboo poles, his skin hanging loose over bones. When he touched his stomach, he could feel his spine. He believed that liberation required destroying the body's hold over consciousness. So he sat in meditation for days without moving, practiced breath retention until he passed out, exposed himself to extreme heat and cold, pushed his body to the absolute edge of survival. 5 other ascetics practiced with him, all of them committed to this path of self-mortification. They watched each other waste away, each secretly proud of how much they could endure, how close to death they could come in pursuit of enlightenment. One evening, Siddhartha sat by the river and realized something that shattered everything he'd believed. His mind was too weak to meditate properly. His body was too damaged to sustain awareness. He was close to dying, but no closer to understanding than when he'd started. This path was wrong. Torturing the body didn't free the mind. It just created a different kind of prison. He decided to eat. Nearby lived a woman named Sujata. She wasn't wealthy or educated or particularly spiritual. She was a dairy farmer's daughter who'd married young and struggled to have children. For years, she'd prayed to the tree spirit that lived in a particular banyan tree near her village. "If you grant me a son, I will make you the finest offering I can prepare." Eventually, she had a son, and Sujata never forgot her vow. On the day Siddhartha decided to break his fast, Sujata was preparing her offering to the tree spirit. She took milk from her best cow, cooked it with rice until it became a thick, nourishing porridge, and added honey from wild bees. She worked all morning, stirring slowly over the fire, making this simple dish as perfect as she could. This offering represented enormous sacrifice. Rice and honey weren't cheap for a poor farming family. The milk came from a cow they needed for daily survival. She was giving from scarcity, not abundance, and the cost was real. When she carried her offering to the banyan tree, she saw a figure sitting beneath it. Even emaciated and filthy, Siddhartha had a presence that made her catch her breath. She thought he must be the tree spirit manifested in human form to receive her offering. She approached with deep reverence and offered him the bowl of rice milk. "Please accept this humble offering," she said, bowing low. Siddhartha looked at the bowl. It was warm, fragrant, the rice milk thick and golden with honey. His body screamed for it, but his mind hesitated. If he accepted food, his fellow ascetics would see him as weak, as having failed, as abandoning the path. Then he realized their judgment didn't matter. This woman was offering from her heart, from her poverty, from her gratitude. To reject her offering because of spiritual pride would be its own kind of delusion. He accepted the bowl and ate. The rice milk tasted like life returning. With each mouthful, he felt strength flowing back into his wasted body. Not just physical strength, but clarity returning to his mind. He had been so wrong about what practice required. When the 5 ascetics saw him eating, they were disgusted. "Siddhartha has given up," they said to each other. "He's returned to indulgence. He was never serious about liberation." They left him there, convinced he'd failed. But Siddhartha hadn't failed. He'd finally understood. The body and mind aren't enemies to be defeated. They're instruments that need care to function properly. You can't reach liberation by destroying the vehicle that carries awareness. That night, nourished by Sujata's gift, he sat beneath a different tree and made a vow. He wouldn't move from that spot until he understood the nature of suffering completely. And he didn't move. For hours, then days, his mind went deeper than it had ever gone when his body was wasting away. He saw how craving creates suffering, how ignorance perpetuates it, how liberation is possible through direct understanding. When dawn came, he was awake in a way he'd never been before. The man who sat down was still seeking. The man who stood up had found what he was seeking. Sujata never knew she'd fed the future Buddha. She went back to her simple life, raising her son, milking cows, making offerings when she could afford them. She gave that bowl of rice milk, thinking it would earn her spiritual merit. She had no idea it would change the course of human consciousness. This story sits at the intersection of giving and receiving, of poverty and abundance, of meaning found in the smallest acts. Sujata had almost nothing. Her life was hard, her resources limited, her future uncertain. But when it came time to fulfill her vow, she didn't give from leftovers. She gave the best she had. She didn't calculate whether the tree spirit deserved such an offering. She didn't wonder if anyone would notice or appreciate her sacrifice. She didn't resent the cost or give half-heartedly. She prepared that rice milk with complete attention, complete devotion, complete generosity. Buddhism teaches that the quality of giving matters more than the quantity. Someone wealthy who drops a coin in a donation box without thinking gives less than someone poor who offers their last piece of bread with full heart. Sujata gave from scarcity with the same wholeness that others give from abundance. That wholeness is what made her gift powerful. But there's another teaching hidden in this story. Siddhartha's acceptance of the gift was itself an act of grace. He could have refused, citing his spiritual discipline. He could have explained that he was beyond such offerings. He could have sent her away to protect his reputation with the other ascetics. Instead, he received. He allowed himself to be helped when he desperately needed help. He let this poor woman's generosity matter. Let it feed him. Let it change the course of his practice. Sometimes receiving is harder than giving. To receive requires acknowledging need, accepting help, letting someone else's generosity touch you. Siddhartha's spiritual pride wanted to refuse, but his wisdom allowed him to receive with gratitude. This exchange between Sujata and Siddhartha shows something essential about how transformation happens. She gave what little she had. He received what he desperately needed. Neither of them understood the full significance of the moment, but their mutual sincerity created something that changed the world. When you're going through hardship, it's easy to believe you have nothing to offer. You're barely surviving. How could you possibly give to anyone else? You're the one who needs help, not the one who can provide it. Sujata teaches differently. She was poor, struggling, living hand to mouth, but she found meaning in hardship by remaining generous within it. She didn't wait until she was wealthy to fulfill her vow. She gave from exactly where she was. Your hardship doesn't disqualify you from generosity. Sometimes hardship is exactly what qualifies you, because you understand what it's like to need, to struggle, to barely make it through. The kindness you offer someone when you yourself are suffering carries a weight that comfortable kindness never can. When you're drowning and you still reach out to someone else who's drowning, that connection means everything. And here's what Sujata's story reveals about meaning in hardship. She didn't find meaning by escaping poverty, or by resenting it, or by making it define her. She found meaning by remaining generous despite it. Her life was hard, but hardship didn't make her hard. Scarcity didn't make her stingy. Struggle didn't close her heart. She kept her capacity to give intact, even when she had little to give from. This is what Buddhism points toward constantly. Your circumstances don't determine your spiritual capacity. Suffering doesn't prevent practice. It can deepen it. Having little doesn't mean being little. Think about what you're holding back because you think it's not enough. The encouragement you don't offer because your own life isn't perfect. The help you don't give because you yourself need help. The kindness you withhold because you're not in a position to solve someone's whole problem. Sujata didn't solve Siddhartha's spiritual crisis. She just offered rice milk. But that simple act at the right moment changed everything. You don't know what your small offering might mean to someone. You don't know how your struggling but still generous heart might touch another struggling heart in exactly the right way at exactly the right time. The Buddha later said that if people understood the power of generosity as he understood it, they wouldn't let a single day pass without giving something. Not because giving earns you points in some cosmic accounting system, but because generosity itself is freedom. When you give from scarcity, you prove to yourself that scarcity doesn't control you. When you offer kindness while suffering, you demonstrate that suffering hasn't conquered you. When you remain generous in hardship, you transcend hardship without leaving it. Sujata went back to milking cows and raising children and living simply. But she lived knowing she'd kept her vow, knowing she'd given her best, knowing she hadn't let poverty make her petty. That's the meaning hardship can hold. Not escaping it, or transcending it, or being rewarded for surviving it, but remaining fully human within it, generous, open-hearted, still capable of giving, even when you have little. Tonight, if you're facing scarcity of any kind, money, energy, time, hope, remember this. Sujata was poor. She gave rice milk. It fed the Buddha. He achieved enlightenment. He taught for 45 years. Millions have been helped by his teaching across 25 centuries. All of it traces back to one poor woman who didn't let poverty stop her from giving. You don't need abundance to be generous. You need willingness to give what you have, exactly as it is, exactly as you are. That's always enough. The Buddha said that even offering a glass of water with a pure heart plants seeds of immeasurable benefit. Not because the water is special, but because the heart that offers it transforms both giver and receiver. Your hardship is real. Your scarcity is real. And your capacity to remain generous within it is what gives both meaning. In ancient India, your birth determined everything. Not just your occupation, but your worth as a human being, your spiritual potential, even whether holy texts could be spoken in your presence. The caste system was absolute. Brahmins at the top, priests and scholars who claimed spiritual authority by birthright. Warriors and rulers next, merchants and farmers below them, and at the bottom, those who worked with their hands in service occupations. Upali was born into the lowest category. A barber. His job was to cut hair and shave the faces of higher caste men who wouldn't dream of learning such skills themselves. He was necessary, but despised, needed, but never respected. He could touch their heads, but couldn't sit at their tables. He could serve them intimately, but could never be their equal. Every morning, Upali went to the homes of wealthy families. He'd wait at the back entrance, never the front. He'd be summoned when convenient for them, never when convenient for him. He'd perform his work with skill while they discussed philosophy and Dharma as if he wasn't there. Sometimes they'd talk about the new teacher, the Buddha, who was saying radical things about spiritual practice. Upali would listen while trimming beards and shaping hair, absorbing teachings that weren't meant for someone like him. One day, several young men from noble families decided to join the Buddha's community. They were Shakyan princes, the Buddha's own relatives, men of the highest birth and privilege. They prepared to leave their wealth and status behind to become monks. These princes employed Upali as their personal barber. As they prepared to renounce the world, they called him to perform one final service, to shave their heads before ordination. Upali shaved their heads, knowing this was the last time he'd serve them. They'd be monks now, living simply, and they wouldn't need a barber's services anymore. He felt the familiar ache of being necessary until he wasn't, useful until they moved beyond needing him. Then, one of the princes said something that changed everything. "We're going to the Buddha to become monks. You should come with us, Upali." Upali stared at him. "Me? I'm a barber. People like me don't become monks. I don't have the right birth, the right education, the right anything." "The Buddha teaches that birth doesn't determine spiritual capacity," the prince said. "Come with us and see." So Upali went, expecting to be turned away, expecting to be told this path wasn't for people like him. But when they arrived, the Buddha did something that shocked everyone present. He ordained Upali first. Before the princes, before the men of noble birth and high education, the Buddha ordained the barber. And according to monastic protocol, seniority is determined by ordination order, not by birth caste. Which meant Upali was now senior to princes. Men who'd employed him days ago now had to bow to him. Men who wouldn't have sat at a table with him now had to treat him as their elder in the Dharma. The Buddha did this deliberately. He was making a statement that birth means nothing, that practice means everything, that the spiritual path is open to anyone, regardless of where society has placed them. But being ordained was just the beginning. Upali had to actually practice, had to prove that the Buddha's faith in him wasn't misplaced. And he did. Upali threw himself into understanding the monastic discipline with the same meticulous attention he'd once given to cutting hair. Every rule, every protocol, every subtle point of monastic conduct, he studied it all with extraordinary care. He had to work harder than the others. They'd grown up studying sacred texts. He'd grown up cutting hair. They had years of education behind them. He was starting from nothing. But Upali had something they didn't. He knew what it meant to be underestimated. He knew what it meant to have everything stacked against you. He knew what it took to excel when no one expected you to even try. He became the foremost expert in the monastic code. When questions arose about proper conduct, the Buddha would defer to Upali. When disputes needed resolution, according to the rules, Upali would clarify. The Barber became the authority on how monks should live. After the Buddha died, the senior monks gathered to preserve his teachings. They chose Ananda, the Buddha's personal attendant, to recite all the discourses he'd memorized. And they chose Upali to recite the entire monastic code from memory. Upali stood before 500 enlightened monks and recited thousands of rules and protocols without a single error. The man who society said couldn't even hear sacred teachings was now the one preserving them for future generations. This wasn't just personal triumph. This was proof that the Buddha's teaching worked, that human potential isn't determined by birth or circumstance, that practice transforms anyone who applies it sincerely. Think about what Upali faced. Not just external barriers, those were obvious. The deeper challenge was internal. When you're told your entire life that you're lesser, that voice gets inside you. It becomes the way you see yourself. You don't just face discrimination from others. You discriminate against yourself. Upali could have refused the invitation to ordain, convinced it wasn't for someone like him. He could have sabotaged himself through doubt, proving society right about his limitations. He could have given up when the study got hard, accepting that he just wasn't smart enough. But he didn't. He took the opportunity he was given and made it count through sheer dedication. Buddhism teaches that what you are is not what you were born as. You're not defined by circumstances of birth, by family status, by what society has decided about people like you. You're defined by what you do with awareness, with practice, with sincere effort. Upali proved this absolutely. The system said he was untouchable spiritually. The Buddha said everyone has the same potential for awakening. Upali's life proved the Buddha right and the system wrong. But here's what matters for you right now, wherever you are. Maybe you weren't born into a literal caste system, but you've probably internalized messages about what people like you can and cannot do. Maybe it's about education. You didn't go to the right schools, so certain paths must be closed. Maybe it's about age. You're too old to start something new, too young to be taken seriously. Maybe it's about background, where you come from, how you grew up, the opportunities you didn't have. Maybe it's about identity, your gender, your race,